Welcome to the Man Down Podcast. My name is Ted Knutson, and we are here to fuck up your life in the best way. Today's episode is kind of awesome, and you should definitely listen to all this. We're going to talk about cheating. Like, is cheating inevitable for men? We're going to talk a little bit about the biology versus the excuses. We're going to talk about the reasons and causes for cheating and infidelity. And then we're going to delve into alternative relationships. What type of things are coming up in the modern dating space, modern relationships that people are investigating to make them more resilient to cheating? Because once you find somebody that you truly, deeply love, you want to keep them for as long as possible. And that involves making everybody happy and finding a way to be satisfied in the crazy mad world that we live in today. So stay tuned.
There's been this thing going around, as it does every couple of years, about whether cheating is inevitable for men. And here we've tried, I think, to balance uh,
Like
the
cheating like Thanos is inevitable.
yeah, exactly.
But no.
But like we've tried to balance the idea that obviously we have biological imperatives with like the stuff that's going on inside us and also the kind of people that we want to be, and cheating kind of touches on all this stuff. I always get a bit frustrated when we get into things like cheating and you have people trying to make evolutionary arguments for the thing that they want to justify.
Mm,
You know, like this just feels like sophistry. And whenever I hear an argument of this kind, I think, yeah, okay, you can argue for why men might be more inclined to cheat. You know, the drive to produce offspring, younger partners read as more fertile, blah 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 blah. But fundamentally, we know that monogamy is possible if people want to do it. So, like, how strong is this biological imperative? And I also just think that like it feels like a cop out. It feels like a way to simplify something. Obviously, to excuse yourself, but also to avoid getting into all the messy emotional stuff, which is often behind cheating, I think.
I think that part is particularly true. Like there are motivations and reasons behind cheating that often sort of bring that to the fore, right? You're like, I would have been
Mm,
fine in like a healthy relationship, but for some reason I feel this way and I'm incapable of having communication that bridges that gap, which is significant. Then you're like, okay, well, I need to act out some way that makes me feel better about myself. And that's usually what this
mm,
circles back around to. And it sounds like really distilled and simple and dull, but what you're dealing with is like the highs of emotion and often betrayal and like there's just all of these different elements that are inside of it. You can simplify it, but that doesn't make it simple.
mm. And the couples therapists who I work with as well, like this is one of those areas where people are very easily offended, you know, and you can understand it because it's getting right to kind of the core of your value. But often one of the questions that a couples therapist would ask, or couple therapist, some people prefer couple therapist, would ask if a couple came in and said, you know, this partner has cheated, is, well, what's going on in your relationship? You know, what's the state of your relationship? And to obviously a load of people, this feels like you're saying it's your fault you were cheated on because you guys were not communicating enough, you weren't having enough sex. And I can understand that. Like, if it's not done carefully, then it could give that implication. But people don't really cheat in a vacuum. And I think seeking to understand the causes of something is not excusing it. Like, I actually had this argument with people recently where we were talking about, you know, celebrities giving public apologies. And their view was if you try and explain it, then you are diminishing the apology. And I can see that angle, but I don't really think that's entirely true. I think you can say, well, I said this thing in the moment because that was how I responded to conflict when I was like 13, 14. I don't think that means you're not taking responsibility. I just think that, like, put it this way, would it be worse if there weren't that context? If you were just like, well, I just said this terrible thing because I thought it and felt it. Like, that's clearly worse. So
Context is
if
basically
think,
always relevant.
yeah,
Whether you agree with it or not, like context is important in all situations. And sometimes it's simply the context of my brain was working like this and I got it wrong. And if I would have known things, I would never say something as idiotic as that. And I'm going to do better not to be wrong in the future. I don't know. Right. So cheating, going back to it, you disagree that there is a significant biological imperative that leads men to cheat.
I think that I don't know how significant it is. You know, like I wouldn't try and put my finger on it. But what I would say is we can't work with that. Like, I don't know how strong that imperative is for you. And I don't think that that imperative alone is enough because if, for example, you've been in a relationship for 2 years and then you cheat, then I'd still want to ask the question, why now?
Mhm.
And if we're asking the question, why now, then it implies that this might be working on you to different degrees at different times. Well, why is it really operating hard now? Is it that you just met someone hot? Is it that you're feeling unseen in your relationship? Is it that you guys aren't having enough sex? Like all this kind of stuff. I'm much more inclined to be practical about it and say, like, well, what can we change here? And I just think that when people are actually asked about why they cheated, the answers they give are almost always emotional ones. They say, I was angry at my partner. I had low self-esteem. We weren't having enough sex. I was bored. Like all this stuff is emotional stuff. Like, and it's rarely there was, it doesn't, it's very rare that somebody would make the argument, well, there was just this kind of like incessant drive inside me to go and like have sex with people. And if there were that drive, then I would still say, well, that might not be a product of your biology, exactly. It might be that you feel the need to prove your worth to yourself, like that. I just want to look at it from a practical point of view, I guess. But like, we act out in relationships, right?
Yes.
And when I say act out, like that is a kind of therapy term, right? So we literally act out patterns that we have learned. And often that is, when I feel worthless, I do X. Attributing it to biology, I think, is a bit of a cop out. It also doesn't really explain why actually now we tend to see that there's not that much difference statistically between women's infidelity and men's infidelity. I think that's a significantly harder biological argument to make for both couples being unfaithful, both genders there being unfaithful.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we have to be kind of in the emotional soup of this, and
Yeah.
that there are reasons, and obviously as a therapist, like you're looking for reasons for everything, right? Like, why did you have this response? Like, how do you do better in the future? How do you control this response in a way that allows you to behave the way that you want to, and like however your personal admirable behavior looks like, let's do that. So I think you're absolutely right in being practical about it, and if you just want to write this all off to like men are more likely to cheat because we need to sow our seed, like this probably isn't the conversation for you. It's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, you know you're gonna do that, like go through non-monogamy as much as possible. Just don't sign up to a relationship where you're lying to people and saying I'm going to be monogamous, and then you just go cheat over and over again, because like that's fucking cruel, and that's it turns you into a bad person, which presumably you don't want to be.
And this is a situation where you think, if torching your relationships repeatedly is more comfortable to you than taking a real inventory of what's going on inside you, then I guess you can keep doing that, but you're going to hurt a lot of people in the process. It's, in my view, easier, like, there's a bit of a torture term here, but easier to approach the problem head on and try and figure out what's going on. Like when I think about the ways I behaved when I was younger, I don't even just mean with cheating, but when I was like a bad partner, it was almost always that there was something I didn't like about myself, that there was something that I was frustrated about, that there was something between me and my partner that I hadn't been able to articulate. The more that I work through that stuff with my wife, like the closer we get, and the less I think anything like this would be even plausible.
I think that when you have kind of a tidy internal house,
Mm,
so like you're out there doing good deeds, you're treating people how you would want to be treated, you're having hard conversations when somebody treats you poorly, or apologetic and open and vulnerable when you treat someone poorly, it
mm,
becomes much easier to like live a life where like you don't end up in these sort of very volatile or emotional spots. Sometimes you do, and it's actually hard to deal with because like it is a very unusual occurrence, and it's quite outside of the norms of what you do. So as you say, like internal work leads you to a spot where you're less likely to you know be in a relationship and commit an infidelity, and having these open, honest, hard conversations regularly with a partner means that you're less likely to get a situation where you feel you need to act out, where you feel you're unseen and unheard, and your partner does not understand you, which is often, as you say, the the underlying causes for someone going and looking for some other validation with a different person.
what do you think? One thing I wanted to ask you as a follow on from our previous episode is, like, how do you think that the kind of evolving relationship landscape and the technological landscape influence this? Because there are all kinds of cheating now that didn't really exist 20 years ago, right? Like if you go and talk to cam girls and pay them, I think most people would consider that crossing some kind of line. But it's not that surprising that people don't really know where the line is.
So I think that the landscape on cheating is less clear than it was before. But
Mm,
I also think the landscape on sexuality is way more complicated than it used to be, right? And there are things that people will do where you're like, look, this is something that I'm kind of inherently do. Like I masturbate with toys or something. Let's say that as a
mhm.
phrase, right? That's totally fine. Everybody gets it. That's fine.
We'll
And
clip
you're
that.
like, I look at, ooh, getting me in trouble already. I look at porn and people are like, well, that's probably fine. But that's not like 100% fine. Like that's like probably fine. And so like there's this whole distribution of stuff and actually like Ayla like puts out surveys around this like which things are fine, right? And to what degrees. Which degrees do you think are filthy or obscene or uncomfortable or whatever. And I think that because of the diversity of sexuality, the diversity of technological interactions that you can have in a sexual sense, it's very, very difficult to pinpoint exactly what that is. And this is again where you have to have forward conversations, like very early in your relationship, about what does your sort of expressed sexuality look like? What do you want it to look like?
Mm,
And what should I expect going forward that we can agree on as sort of like our boundaries on this type of stuff? Not to say that these boundaries couldn't change if we both had conversations and agreed to them, but it's a much more complicated space than I think it ever has been before. And that's before you ever touch on things like, hey, there's 12% of women identify as bisexual, which means that like if they get in a relationship with men, they're going to feel possibly somewhat sexually unsatisfied occasionally because they also want to be in relationships with women all the time or on a regular basis or the other way around, right? I'm a lesbian, but occasionally I'm very attracted to men and sometimes I want to express that side of me. Well, the only way you can express that side of you in a monogamous relationship is via infidelity. So are there ways that you can bridge that gap or find ways that you have some comfort level that like you're not just burying part of yourself forever, which I think is the thing that like really ends up being soul shriveling for a lot of folks and sometimes ends up breaking them apart in moments of crisis or misunderstanding.
yeah, I mean, I don't think that that necessarily has to be. I know that you're just making an example, but I don't think that necessarily has to be like burying a part of yourself. Like, like we know bisexual people who are in monogamous relationships, right? And are kind of like, I do not feel like there's a part of me that's missing. But the thing you're talking about at the top there, having the open conversation about it is one reason that I think occasionally I will see something about how alternative relationship setups are going to make cheating a thing of the past. And that is just simply not possible because the people who cheat are not just cheating. Like the implication is that you cheat just because you want to have sex with more people.
Mhm.
And that is just not the case. Like people cheat for all sorts of reasons, as we've covered. And so and if you don't really want to have honest conversations about what you want and what you can offer, then realistically, like polyamory, ethical non-monogamy, like these things are not for you. Because I'm always struck when I hear people talk about those things that it is like relentless communication.
Yes.
It
I'm
sounds like fucking
shocked.
hard work.
Well, exactly. I'm shocked by the bandwidth that some of our friends have
Yeah.
to be able to coordinate multiple different partners and then also group settings where like this is my partner's like full-time girlfriend and I happen to
Mm,
be there and so I also have to have a relationship with them and with them and with them. Like it is, as you say, it is relentless. For many of us it seems overwhelming. I think you have to be like some degree of extrovert in order to like
yeah.
want to succeed in these things, or you have to be a particular type of introvert. I don't know, like personally, like how that works. But no, I think what I was trying to express on part of that is that usually cheating happens in kind of these moments of crisis or these
Mm,
identity weaknesses where you're
yeah.
like, I don't feel seen or appreciated by person. Therefore, I need to find someone else that sees or appreciates me, and I am having sex or I want to lash out. Like there's a lot of different reasons behind it, right? And so when you end up in a situation that could inherently be fragile when you get to the crisis points, when you get to the edges of what is normal or acceptable, or you're a person that has a lot of crisis points, which we know some people who are like that as well. You have to look at your sources of instability. And I know this sounds like nerdy or framework or like very kind of intellectual and dull, But by looking at those things, you're then predicting, how am I going to encounter problems in the future? Like, how am I going to break in the future? And that's really, really useful to you, because then you can set up conversations and systems to be like, hey, and sometimes we talk about self-diagnosis in all different forms of your life. But when you're talking to your partner, you're like, hi, I hope that you love me, like, and but if you don't love me, that's okay too. Like, I'm chill about that, because like when you're first entering a relationship, like you need to find somebody that's opting into you. Chris Lakin, who is quite interesting on Twitter, talks about attraction being predetermined in many cases. And all you're doing in the flirting process is revealing. You're trying to reveal whether or not you and this person are deeply attracted to each other, and you're trying to do it as quickly as possible. And so if you're out there expressing yourself in a very open way and allowing somebody else to receive that, and then they decide that, yeah, dude, I'm into you, this is great, like I want all of that, give me more, as opposed to I'm trying to hide all of myself so that maybe they won't notice that I'm some sort of weird person that they aren't interested in. But then that just reveals itself later. You're just delaying the inevitable on that. So the same thing with breaking points. So you're like, you find somebody that you're really into, you get to the point where you need to have these open, honest conversations, and then you're like, I have these points where like I might fall apart around it. And if it happens, it's you might take it personally, but it's not to do with you. But I'd love you to like be aware of those things. And maybe sometimes you'll be able to diagnose it for me. Like, hey, you look like this. Are you all right? Like, should we talk
Mm,
about something? And the reason why we're talking about all this in the space of infidelity is because infidelity usually happens around those crises or those breaking points. And so by being a little more aware of them, or by designing a relationship system that allows you to withstand those as bumps as opposed to breaks, you end up
yeah.
in a better spot.
Yeah, because it's not like infidelity doesn't exist in systems other than monogamy, right? Like, and even if infidelity doesn't exist in the sense that like you're in trouble because you had sex with somebody else, there are all sorts of ways that you can break trust.
Yes.
Like whether it's dealing with your metamours in a respectful way or not being fully open about your feelings in a particular situation. The thing I like most though about those about for example ethical non-monogamy is the way that it shifts responsibility to the person experiencing the emotion,
So
right? Like,
this is where you have the jealousy conversation. And
yeah,
and so many people are like, "Oh, jealousy must not exist for these people because they're actually out there having sex with multiple people." That is not the truth in any way, shape, or form. It is a misunderstanding of what you think is going on versus what actually happens.
yeah. This reminds me of like, was it the Tom Cruise conversation we were having? Anyway, something like this about like dealing with the things that make you uncomfortable, like this idea of like, oh, you must not be scared because you went and did this scary thing. It's like, no, of course I'm scared doing it. I'm not a human, though Tom Cruise comes quite close to not being fully human. But I'm I just experience the fear and I don't mind being afraid. And that to me, I think this is a huge like learning that we can all take from ethical monogamy and try and move forward with. Because a lot of the time, and this maybe is the kind of excuse making side of cheating, people try and attribute what's going on with them to their partner. So it's, oh, well, you're not meeting my needs in this way. I'm feeling jealous. And this must come down to something that you're doing.
Mm.
And maybe it does come down to something that they're doing, but it's going through a process and getting metabolized as jealousy, right? That's you. That's on that's on you. And so I think this idea that rather than trying to correct your partner's behavior when you feel jealousy, you understand that you experience jealousy and you accept that it's something going on inside you and that it's your problem and you have to learn to deal with it. This to me is an exceptionally like sophisticated way of viewing jealousy.
I had to take this back and explain it to somebody. Like, I don't really have sexual jealousy.
Hmm.
And that's actually a fairly common trait, but like people don't often necessarily discuss it that much. Like, oh, would you mind if your partner, had sex with somebody else? Like, as long as like we have a discussion about it and I know and understand it, like that would not be a breaking point for me, because I understand the desires around this. And in fact, I think that you live a richer life if all of those moments you have to bury your sexual attraction to somebody else, you're able to actually follow through with it. And even if you didn't have sex, you're able to have like a very intimate, flirty interaction. Like life is sparkly around those moments. And by creating a better life, creating something that is loud and vibrant and expressive, like that's exactly what we're on the earth to be able to do, as long as you can sort of withstand the consequences. But one of the things about jealousy and about not monogamy and everything else is that you're always assuming that like you're locked in, right? The other person's locked in too. And the reality is every single day is a choice. Every single day is a choice to be with the person that you're currently with and to continue that forward. And people get divorced all the time. And they get divorced for big reasons, they get divorced for small reasons, whatever. But the reality is your partner is always choosing to be with you. A contract has nothing to do with their actual behavior. And hopefully you're with a person that you think is a good person that is going to continue with the agreement that you have amongst each other, but you don't control it. And like you and nothing controls it. Like they control their own behavior, and that is the end point. And as much as we love and understand people, there's always this gap where like you can't fully understand somebody else. You can't fully
Mm.
understand what their background was. You can't fully understand what they're going through. You don't understand their chemical makeup. And if you have any questions about that, like watch your girlfriend, partner, wife go through her cycle and see how much her day to day changes based off of the chemical interactions. Or like watch your teenage children go through puberty, or see your wife get pregnant, or see her go through perimenopause. Like there's a billion different reasons why the chemical concoction can like throw everything off, despite the fact that this is a person that is rock solid for every other moment of their lives. So the broader point around this is once you understand that everybody is making a choice all the time to continue on with whatever this beautiful status quo that you currently have, then you're like, oh, okay, so like I have to kind of trust that like we're good enough and I'm good enough. And that's a scary point too, that we
Mm.
love each other enough to keep this going. And many times what you say is that comes back to an internal question. Am I good enough to be loved that way? Do I deserve to be loved that way? Can I be
Yeah.
loved by other people that way? That's where we often break. And that's where the jealousy comes from. Oh, well, she's not allowed to love somebody else like she loves me because like I'm the only person that's able to fit in that spot, or he, or whomever you're talking about. So, yes, it's very much a you question and not a them question, but reversing that perception really challenging.
And this is the thing. Like there- mm, there's a lot here that's like very
Mhm.
uncomfortable to deal with, right? And I think that I always thought, well, ENM or something would probably not be for me because I don't think I'm particularly sexually jealous, but I do think I'm quite jealous about attention and things. But over the years, I've come to the conclusion that like if I were single, I would probably have to try some of these things, as ethically as I could, because actually the opposite might be true. That there's a sort of aversion therapy there where I could say, oh, somebody might like they might want to have sex with someone who I see as like hotter than me or someone who's smarter than me or whatever, and they might still want me. Like maybe that would actually be good for my self-esteem. It would show that my value is about it's like qualitative rather than quantitative. It's not like, oh, I'm a 9 out of 10 cleverness and they're a 10 out of 10 cleverness. It's like, no, it's my version that this person wants.
We fit each other perfectly in this way, and that doesn't mean that like they might not be interested in somebody else, but like the fact that they keep coming
Mm,
back is is like a really strong indicator that you have a great bond. So I think that a lot of people don't understand how those alternative relationships work, and in many cases those alternative relationship concepts were developed because monogamy kept breaking. And because like you find somebody that you love, but like one thing that happens, or potentially multiple things that happen that just throw you off, mean that you never get to be with that person again. You found a horrible
mm.
break. Like that in and of itself is a terrifying way to go through life. And so many of these what the kids are doing, or maybe back in the 70s it was the peace, love, and and drugs folks that decided to start like forging these paths, is a response to how do we create something that is a little more resilient to at least this one
Mm.
particular breaking point, and can we withstand it? And some people can't, and some people can. And I think we're finding more and more people are willing to try because they have learned that the alternatives are dangerous and fraught as well.
Do you think that monogamy will become a minority? I mean, I know it's hard to imagine because like there's still such a stranglehold that that religious or post-religious ideas have on our societies, the societies that you and I have grown up in, at least. But you would sort of imagine that over time, like, there's no real reason why monogamy would be the dominant form of relationship setup.
I think it is because of the child rearing, and that's
Hmm.
like pretty significant. And dealing with a parent that is afar as opposed to a parent that is in the same house is like co-parenting separately
But
is
some
very challenging.
spares would be good. I would love
Absolutely,
some sparents would be excellent.
yeah. This is also true. Coming back around to that question, I think that it's hard to say. Like, I think so many things are in flux right now, and actually, we're seeing birth rates crash, and I have theories about why that's happening, and that's not for this podcast. But I think that you will find that cheating will become less stigmatized overall because people will enter into loose relationship or loose forms of relationships that are a little more resilient, even if it's monogamous or monogamish. And
Mm.
that's actually one of the things that's pretty interesting to talk about. And we could do multiple episodes on this whole topic because like the diversity of the topic is really interesting too. You mentioned how jealousy is there, and I think that jealousy is like really, really important, powerful concept. But also, as you mentioned there's the concept of the third that comes into some of the writing around, either monogamy relationships or continuing to have sort of a spice in your relationship. And when you find that somebody else is really attracted to your partner, like it awakens something in you as well. And part of like what we're talking about is like always being like on the lookout for these emotional reactions that you have. Like, and you're like, oh fuck, this person who's hot thinks that my partner is hot, or she's
Mm.
over there and she's talking to him and he's having a good reaction. That is pretty attractive. The other way around, like, I'm here, I'm talking to this woman, and like she's clearly very into me. And your partner's across the room and they're like, looked like you had a good conversation there. Like, it's like, yeah, we were vibing. That was really hot. She's like, I thought it was hot too. Like, it was nice to see somebody else sort of validate the fact that like, I think you're really attractive. And so there are elements inside of this that play and interconnect. And a lot of times that third then comes back into the bedroom as a concept, but not as an entity. So you're like, oh, it was spicy that that person was into you. Like, what did you like about her? Did you like the fact that like her boobs were bigger than mine, or that this, or like, did you think about that? You can have a whole conversation about this that then turns into this little bitty like fantasy thing that plays back into your bedroom space. And I've talked to people that have used that on a regular basis. They'll go out to bars together. They're not necessarily looking for a threesome, but they do want their partner to go out and themselves to go out and just have attraction in the space. So
Mm.
there's a limit behind it that says that we're going to be monogamous. We're not going to take home somebody and have sex with them, but we're definitely allowed to go out there and have sexual feelings without fear of repercussion. And that I think actually is a pretty useful and forward thinking idea that says that once you get with one person, you're not going to just be attracted to this one person for the rest of your life. So like we might as well create a framework that allows us to like express attraction with a boundary. And some of those boundaries,
Mm.
vary over time and space. Sometimes you do bring somebody back into your bedroom. Like that can be like terrifying for lots of reasons.
Sure.
Sometimes you allow each other to, sort of freelance, as it were. So like some forms of this relationship are not fully poly, but they're able to go have sex with other people. Some forms of
Mm.
these are you're able to have emotional and sex with other people, but not necessarily have like a combined unit or interactions between the partners. Sorry.
I'm
You were
sorry
thinking
if
daisy chain.
no, no. I'm just I don't know if anybody can hear the rain coming through my microphone. If so, I apologize. I was not thinking daisy chain, but obviously now I am. I, sorry, I just have to say this side thing. The other day, I don't remember why, but I described something to my wife as a lemon party, and my 4-year-old heard,
Why?
and she was just like, "What's a lemon party, Papa?" And she wouldn't, and then like Emma and I like dissolved into laughter, and so the way that children can, they're excited, they've made you laugh,
Yes.
and so she just kept saying like, "It's a lemon party." it was so good. And then we went and saw some of our little antenatal group because all our kids are starting school like around these same 2 weeks. And I've known all these kids since they were born. And then we told this to a bunch of these people, and they were like, what's a lemon party? And then we were in this position of having to explain.
I also love the idea that this goes into
Jesus.
school and like, Mr. Van Stratton, could you please come? The head teacher needs to talk to you about something. And she's a little switched on and she's like, so your daughter keeps talking about lemon parties while in class and something that she finds very exciting. And I just wanted to understand where this came from. So, I mean, just the consequences of the
So
downstream
good.
effects of your children picking up a phrase.
One of these dads texted me afterwards, and he sent me a screenshot. He'd asked Chat GPT what a lemon party was because he was too scared to Google it. Um,
This is worse, not better.
I know. I was like, why would you want to have this conversation with Chat GPT? But anyway, I don't. We got to there from daisy chaining, but like I do think that these things are really good entry points, if you'll pardon the imagery, because a, a lot of surveys, still say that people in monogamous relationships are highly resistant to having them opened up. Like there was one study I was reading that where 2/3 of female respondents said they would end their relationship if their partner asked to open it up,
Mhm.
which I thought was kind of an insanely strong position rather than to say I would be opposed to it, but I would listen. Maybe it was just like a weirdly phrased questionnaire. But I think if you could say, look, let's we can go out and you can flirt and you can you can dress up and look hot when you go out with your friends. And if somebody comes up and flirts with you and buys you a drink, that's okay. Here's the boundary. But anything up to that is fine. And you not only don't have to feel guilty about it, but in fact, you can see it as generating sexual energy that then you can put back into the relationship.
I
I
love it.
really like that idea,
I
especially
love
because
it.
I love to flirt. I love to flirt, Ted. And
If
I
you
think
meet Patrick at, any future events, like just be aware. Like he might switch it on.
that this is now writing checks that like my flirtation can't cash. But yeah, like I do like to flirt, and I think that it is good for your self-esteem, and it is good to like get a little bit of spark. And you're totally right that when somebody is attracted to your partner, sometimes you feel possessive in the good way, right? Where you're like, I recognize the value of what I have. It's nice to see your partner through external eyes once in a while rather than be like, here is the person that I, have to do the bills with and, mop up child vomit with. Like my wife came back she was at the Edinburgh Book Festival a couple of weeks ago, and she was like, I think a guy was chatting me up in this line. And she said, so at a certain point, I sort of slipped in that I had children just so he knew what the deal was. But she said he obviously was not that practical because I had a suitcase and I was on my way to the station.
Mm,
So the fact that he thought he could get this one in under the wire was pretty impressive.
this one in.
Dear me. But I was kind of like, oh, this is fun. This is fun that somebody like was flirting with my wife. She didn't know how to deal with it.
Uh huh.
It's not really her like métier to deal with it. But yeah, after that I thought, yeah, well, if I saw you, I would go up and talk to you. And also I kind of had to explain to her that I was like, I don't think that this guy was talking to you at random for no reason. Like like this is not again, like not to characterize all men, but I was like, that's not really how men operate.
So
Like,
I
to be completely honest.
along similar lines, like I had a couple times where past partners told me that, if I came up to them at a bar and started talking to them, they'd be like
Hmm.
very interested. And they're like, you should do that. You should actively go, chat people up, as you might say in the olden fashioned language.
Hmm.
Yeah, in public, you should feel comfortable with that because like people will potentially be responsive. And I was like, ooh, this is hard for me to process. Like I find this quite challenging. But no, it helped change like my potential interactions out in the world. I think the other thing that happens there is, again, you take the concept, you take the idea, and you've got limits behind it. But nevertheless, like if you if you went through a series of relationships that then, sort of like shortish, medium term to long term. So like say anywhere between 6 months and 18 months. and you keep learning from your next partner, and you keep learning from the next partner and the next partner,
Mm.
and you're like you're learning about yourself, but also learning about like what you can withstand, which things you have regret about, and you're like, okay, so by the time you get a few partners down the line, you look back at what happened with that first partner, and you're like, oh wow, I would have acted in so many ways that were different than I originally did if I just had known more. Because like I'm more
Mm.
resilient about things, I'm more able to accept stuff, and I really valued that first partner. And I might be quite sad that things broke up, or I broke it up for like stupid reasons, or like there's just like
Mhm.
tons of different ways you look back at it. But if you take it as that type of learning concepts, it's actually important for you to start to sort of stretch these boundaries at different times. And I've
Mhm.
taken on board a bunch from my past relationships and just interwoven it inside of my life. And that's part of what makes it challenging to occasionally sort of not think about these people on a regular basis, but also like it enriched my life in pretty dramatic ways. And
Mm.
anybody that comes into your life that stretches your boundaries is probably enriching you, and you should take that as a potential positive, as long as it doesn't break you.
Well, yeah. Sometimes it might break you a little bit. That's also not necessarily the worst thing if you're too rigid, I
We grow
guess.
back stronger.
Mm. Look, I don't know how much more I have to say about this today, but I do see this as the first conversation of probably several in this area. Like neither one of us is an expert on all the little nuances. Like I think that it would be good for us to have some people on at some point who can talk about their experience of living in different relationship setups to the ones that you and I have had. But it's definitely something that I think people should be thinking about. And I'm kind of hoping that as we start to shed some of the judgmental ideas we have in this area, that people will feel like they can fit into the right kind of box rather than trying to force themselves into one that doesn't make sense for them.
You can try and be judgmental about all this shit, but it's gonna run you over, because like
Mm,
that's the way of the world. Like you're trying to stand against the tide, and the tide is relentless at the moment. So like even if you're not willing to accept that these open or these E&M relationships are something, or poly, that are something that's okay, or that like you might be interested,
yeah.
which is totally fine. Like you obviously have your own thoughts about how things work, but like you might want to process it. But some people are so scared to have the ideas because they're scared they might change. They're scared they might become different simply by thinking about it, because like it's anathema and they don't want to be rejected as part of the in group of whatever they're at, or like they've got lots of hangups from how they were raised, their parents. But I think even if you're not looking at that, one of the ways that, couples are trying to become more resilient, they're trying to have like more deeply longer fulfilling sex lives, not just like get married to somebody and 5 years down the road, like, we have sex every 2 months and that's, 6 times a year plus once on my birthday. Yay. They're like, that's not what I'm fucking signing up for. And in fact, like, let's make it really clear up front that like I'm a high libido. I want to continue to have sex with you, but like we also need to find ways to keep it spicy. And even if you're with one person trying as hard as you possibly can to keep it spicy, like one person's hard. Like I can have vanilla 1,000 different ways, but at some point you might want a little bit of a different flavor. um I
I loved watching you back off that in real time. You went right up to the edge of it and you were like, "Nope, I'm gonna retreat."
this is what you learn to do, in in the dom world. You just right up to the edge and then bring it on back. No, so but swinging, play parties, sex toys, outfits, sometimes people will agree that they want to explore, but they want to do it together. And I think the together thing is happening a lot more often too. And you see on apps like Field, like some people are volunteering to be a unicorn. Unicorn in this case would be a woman or a man that is a third in a threesome. And that's like a way that people are like, look, I'm fine with that. Or like we can visit other couples. So the old school swinging thing that's been around forever, but then, also had like a 50s and 60s type thing, seems to be a commonality of certain religious cultures that may have historically had polygamy as part of their basis. That's also something that's potentially interesting. Uh, Going out to these clubs and these parties together, whether, you're actually doing anything there, or like whether you're just dressing up in a particular style. Many people that are closer to the LGBTQ plus community are comfortable going out, like, maybe it's leather night, maybe it's lace night, mesh, color, whatever. And
Mm,
they dance in sort of a sexual, not a directly sexual, but like a close to sexual situation where people are hot and sweaty and scantily clad, and that's a way
mhm,
that they explore too. The point is there are lots of different ways that people are moving the Overton window and the threshold on what's acceptable inside of a relationship to keep them viable for longer, to keep them interesting and spicy for longer, because they just don't want it to break. Because when you meet an awesome person that you deeply love, how do we make sure that we keep each other fulfilled and satisfied for as long as possible?
And to go back to porn, that we were talking about last week, like then I was kind of making a joke when I brought up the Jerry Seinfeld thing. If it doesn't matter if I ruin my appetite, I've got another one coming along. But I think it's it's this same idea here, that I think there are some people who have this mindset that you have this finite amount of sexual energy, and any of it that gets directed outside the relationship is lost. And this is just simply not true. Like you can actually speed up the rate at which you create it.
Simply
And
telling your
also just
partner, I got really turned on today by thing. And like, hmm, thank you for telling me. I'm now intrigued. Maybe I'm turned on by thinking about you being turned on by thing. And like you just injected energy by not necessarily being together, but communicating.
eye contact on the tube, that if you can take that back and like plug it into your relationship, that's pretty good.
Yeah, just sit there looking slutty, reading a book on the tube, occasionally look your partner in the eye, as
Yeah,
Patrick does, like
I
unbutton
do
another
that.
button. Mm.
If I have one to unbutton, Ted.
Partly
Like,
because it's fucking hot and sweaty in the tube half the time anyway. So like you do need to unbutton some buttons.
this is why I need to get into the mesh thing, just because I do run hot. So I think that the mesh would really help me out from that point of view.
All right, for Cub Daddy Patrick, this is me, Theodore Knudsen, saying some of us like chocolate, some of you might not, but it's okay to explore flavors in your life. Thank you for listening. We will be back with another episode real soon.
I was actually not just now, but I was watching a video about therapy speak and concept creep, and I didn't know, really disagree with anything in it, but I still found it annoying.
Mm,
I guess
yeah.
because a lot of people seem very worried about therapy speak going into the mainstream, but they don't seem worried about tech speak or finance speak or political speak. And I think all of those have some of the same problems. Plus, the first example in this video that I was watching, it was like gaslighting. Like gaslighting is now everywhere, and I was like, that's not a therapy term. No one would fucking use that in therapy. That's from a fucking film, man. Like, but on the other hand, I do agree, and it is annoying because to me, I was kind of like, does this deserve a larger thing than just it is annoying when people call something that they didn't like trauma? In the same way that it is annoying when somebody says beg the question when they don't really know what that means, or when someone says jealousy when they
Emotional
mean envious.
damage. Right? It's when like the TikTok memes come to the
Yeah,
fore, and then suddenly
yeah.
everyone adopts them even without understanding them.
Mm.
Yeah, my kids did it, so like I can't even be like, oh, it's not part of my house. uh, I don't
What have you?
you might not have been in grad school, but this reaction that you're having here, I had the moment that I had to start writing things for grad school,
Mm.
and the degree of jargon that was used to obfuscate what everybody meant, but actually sort of make them sound intelligent, made me
Oh,
want to
sure.
vomit every single fucking second that I had to read these
Mm.
journal entries. And I was like, these are terrible. Who the fuck wrote these? Like I had awesome professors teach me to get to the point, make your point very clear.
Yeah.
And then I get into grad school and they're like, "Oh, you need to be writing more like this." I was like, "I do not need to be writing more like this. Like this is actually completely unacceptable. I'm sorry that you think that way." And it turns out that over the course of time, the people that became notable were not only the ones that had like really useful, interesting ideas about how models work and how like, the economics of the world works, but also the ones that could clearly communicate that information back to policymakers and or human beings. So
Well, this is the thing. Actually, this kind of comes back to your football work, but I have no idea why they would want you to write more in that style, because it should. But now I could understand it. So now, if I were an academic, there would be a part of me that would think I'm going to make all my writing as Byzantine as possible, in the hope that when they eventually cut the funding to my department, they're like, "Well, we can't do that because Patrick is such a special mind. He has an understanding that nobody else could ever reach, and therefore we can't cut him." Whereas actually what it is just I write in like 130 word sentences that go absolutely nowhere. That I can see the merit of. But why would they not want you to just express your if your ideas are good, why wouldn't they want you to express them in the clearest possible form?
So possibly the single most influential pieces of political writing in American history are things called the Federalist Papers. And when you read the Federalist Papers, like they
Sure.
are actually excellent writing, and you can tell that there are different
Yeah.
writers inside of them because some of them are crystal clear. But one of the things they don't have is punchy little sentences because writing in that time period was very, very different. And so like, commas are a frequent thing, long sentences are a frequent thing. It didn't stop it from being influential. It was more of a product of its times. But even going back then, like when I read them, I was like, these are really interesting reads, and they're sort of important reads. You don't have to be, hard to understand, even if you're losing using these long sentences. But if you wanted to intentionally do it, you could.
Then when you get like yeah, I mean, like there's the stylistic thing of the time, but you still like to imagine that the long sentence is doing something, right? It's because it's all one thought,
Yes.
or because it's writing to persuade rather than writing to just like deliver simple information. So like the Gettysburg Address is another example of this, I think, where like the sentences by modern standards are pretty long and convoluted and have lots of nesting clauses. And Melville is like this, like Moby Dick is like this.
Hmm.
But that's not writing that's entirely designed to just like I need to impart information to you, right? It's writing that's designed to give you a feeling, and therefore I'm like I don't need it necessarily to be crystal clear, because sometimes you watch a film or listen to a song and I'm like, do I know what this is about? I don't know really, but like did I have the feeling that I think the author wanted me to have? Yeah, like I think I
Right.
did.
Yeah, it doesn't
Mm.
have to be always transparent. Like, you don't have to. One of the things you actually should do is like divorce yourself from trying to understand every little thing, and let the sort of the stuff wash over you. You can, after, on your second, third, fourth watch, like then you can go back and try and do those things. But like the first time, just like allow yourself to be a passenger to the art. One of the first modern writers that, one of the notable modern writers that writes in a much more current style, and sort of the world adopted it, is Hemingway, right?
Sure.
Hemingway's short, punchy, like precise in all the wording that he uses. Sometimes to the extent that you're like, this is barren in how you
Yeah.
write. The opposite of Cormac McCarthy. Cormac McCarthy writes about barren places, but is not barren in how he writes. So
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because like he always says that like Hemingway was this great influence, and you're like, I guess in the kind of like the sort of muscularity of it, and like, and obviously the kind at times the humorlessness of it, especially Hemingway's like as Elmore Leonard always says, he's like, I loved Hemingway until I realized he didn't have a sense of humor.
yes,
Cormac McCarthy is a bit better than that, but like there's a very like I am a male doctoral candidate in a STEM subject like vibe to Cormac McCarthy. You know what I mean? But like, I always think that Christianity played a part in this as well, because you certainly get it in Latin, where you get this idea that like you get Latin moving away from the classical style, which is a bit more flowery and a bit more convoluted, into a plainer style with the advent of Christianity in the Roman Empire. Like, so, no, no, no. What's important is like what we're putting over. And then I think as well that you can chart some of this idea in modern speech as well, from when you get rid of things like the King James version of the Bible and you move towards like new international versions, and like there's this idea again that it's like, oh no, no, any kind of beauty in language might be any kind of sophistication is by its nature kind of corrupting, because it's hiding what's really going on.
right. And
But
part
I
of
like
that
to
is
blame
is
Christianity
political
for this.
messaging. Like
Sure.
like we need to have clean political messaging that's repeatable over and over across a wide variety of people throughout the whole population,
Mm.
and that is easy to interpret so that it doesn't get lost and goes through generations, right? So no, I think anyway, do we have like shows to talk about? We just immediately
Sure.
jump into.
Well, we're kind of touching on stuff that I want to ask you about on the football podcast. What you were talking about with grad school, I think it's interesting that actually what's ended up being important for you is the communication element of it. It's not it's like, how do I translate this to somebody who doesn't have the expertise in this? How do I show them it's relevant so they can take the information out of it that they need to? Like
God, I
that's
learned
kind
to
of
do
interesting.
this in Magic the Gathering.
Really?
Yeah, so Magic has like all of these funky concepts of like advantage and card advantage and tempo and um being ways able to, the concepts that go through like many different games, but being able to sort of like minimize other people's threats or spells with like fewer cards, right? Like you get a resource advantage from it. And so many games have resource advantages. But then like explaining these across the internet in a clean way like became quite difficult in many ways because it's a
Mm,
challenging game. It might be one of the world's most complicated games. And so yeah, just learning to write about that regularly and try and talk about how to play a deck and how to have fun with it at the same time. And I would get huge headaches trying to figure out like how do I boil this down over and over again into something that's easily pick upable by a new person to the game.
mm,
And I didn't always do that, and I wasn't always very good at it, but I did spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. Then when you came to football, like you still have some of the same concepts. And literally, I was in a room with my board the other day, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do nerd shit, and I'm gonna do nerd shit here with you, but like I
mm,
wouldn't do nerd shit if it were, other investor groups or anything like that, or in front of
sure.
coaches or in front of this. And I was like, yeah, so like we're gonna talk about the population and the distribution of things and like how things actually work, and then we're gonna talk about like resource advantage and arbitrage. And it's like, if you don't understand anything, stop me, and I will explain these concepts. But it's important to get what I mean because we have different types of arbitrage that we're taking advantage of in how people operate football, whether
Mm,
that's on the pitch, up through transfers, and then up through like commercial revenues and
yeah.
and transaction costs. So, yeah, is understanding the complexity of how the world works, and then understanding like how to distill that down into something easily understood from somebody else and translatable is hugely challenging. And if you're good at it, like you're a miracle worker, and if you're not good at it, you're just like normal. So
Mm. It's fun to have those. I think kids help in this regard, but it always makes me think of, is it Wired who has they have something where someone has to explain a concept to like varying levels of expertise, and there's one where Jacob Collier is trying to explain, I think, the circle of fifths, and he has to explain it to a child and then somebody who's played a bit of music, and it keeps going up until the last person he has to explain it to is Herbie Hancock. And it's honestly fascinating because to a child, he's like, okay, what common ground do we have? When he gets to Herbie Hancock, they don't really talk very much. They start playing on the piano together. And it was like, oh, I know what you mean. Because Herbie Hancock has some understanding at that level, which is beyond conceptual. You know, like it's almost like I don't believe in God, but it does at times you can understand. I think music is one of the areas where it you sort of do feel like some people have been implanted with this special ability, right?
absolutely. Some
Cool.
people with perfect pitch, some people with just the ability to inherently understand the mathematical nature of music, which is quite funky. And then some people, I mean, like Ariana Grande is possibly one of the most talented child musicians that I've ever seen, right? Like she would go
Hmm.
on and she would do these absurd things like in front of people musically at an age that you're like, how's that even possible? And then yeah, there was this girl on Ellen ages ago that did super bass, right? And she's like like she's
Okay.
singing. She's like, I don't know, 6 years old, and she's got a younger sister there. And she's like dancing and repeating it, right? And God, my daughter, like just last weekend, I was like, I promise I will watch K-pop Demon Hunters with you. I want to do it together. And she
Yes.
was, like a month ahead of the curve, so she knew a lot of the stuff. And she gets up and she does the soda pop dance as it comes on. And I was like,
Oh my
Jesus,
god.
kid, you're so impressive in like the things that you
Mm,
picked up and the stuff that you want to repeat. And I don't know what I was like at that age, but I do find it like fascinating. And music is one of those places. But sometimes people just are. Chess is another one where like you get the precocious grandmasters and things just fit their brains well. And I think
mm,
that's true. I think for everybody in life, there's probably a certain situation that you could be put in and you're like, wow, I just inherently understand this. This is amazing. And
yeah.
and then in a lot of other situations, you're like, I have no ability to understand what's going on whatsoever, but you put me in the right spot and I'm awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, look, you tried to get us back on track. I carried on derailing us for once. Like we did it this way around this time.